The Nissan Silvia, what started out as a luxury sports coupe, became synonymous with drift culture and Initial D. Today, some see it as a 90s sports coupe, others a car for tearing through the twisties, others still a drift missile. But above all, the S-Chassis is a line of do-everything sports cars. You want power? Get an S15 with a turbo. You want a bare-bones classic Japanese sports car? Get an S13. Or if you want something in between, you could try one of these. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the S14 Silvia. The first thing that struck me was that, man, this car drives way different to anything that I'm used to. It's quite a surreal experience getting into something sort of this vintage. It's really, really interesting just to see how much car design and drivability has improved on. But there are some good points. The steering's pretty light. And for the era, this is some quick steering, man. You only have to go like a quarter of a turn to go through most of these, and the car just moves along happily. It's really nice. Outright handling is also very good. This car is obviously on lowering springs and has some nice sticky tyres, the same ones that are on my Accord. So in that regard, the front end grip feels very similar. There's not a lot of understeer. You can just push it into a corner and you know what it's going to do. Yep, it's definitely a rear-wheel drive car, there's no denying that. Throttle response is literally just instantaneous, which really helps to sort of give this car that directness that you really look for. This one has the naturally aspirated 2-litre SR20 DE engine, paired with a 5-speed manual. And with it being a 1994 pre-facelift model, there's absolutely nothing in the way of electronics to get in the way. This is a car all about driving.
And you're left alone with a high-revving 4-cylinder engine that sounds sensational. I can already tell that this car is an absolute joy to operate. Back in the day when this came out, these cars were immensely popular because they were fun to drive, they had a great range of reliable engines that you can make power out of, especially the turbocharged ones. And while this one doesn't have a turbo, and it's certainly not fast by any stretch of the word, you can tell right from the off that it's just fun, you know? Push it into a corner, hang the back end out a little bit. Handles very well. The engine sounds really nice, revs very high. But it's certainly not fast by any stretch of the word, that's for sure. Unfortunately, it's not the quickest thing in the world. But it is a heap of fun to drive, and all you need to do is just give it a little dab of throttle out of the corner. You can feel the back end coming around. Sounds fantastic. And just having that rear-wheel drive chassis that wants to, you know, do a bit of that, it's just fun. Oh yes. Final thoughts on the S14 Silvia. The positives: you're getting yourself a highly coveted and well-respected Japanese sports car that a lot of people really, really like. And as part of that, it's got fantastic aftermarket support too. In terms of the driving dynamics of the car that I drove, it's got a great sounding engine when you rev it out over 7,000 RPM. The throttle response is excellent. The handling is absolutely face-bending. And if you really sort of unsettle it and poke it with a bit of a stick, it will go sideways. In many ways, I would describe it as a 90s Toyota GT86. But because it is a relic of the 90s, it's plagued with old car issues. And the biggest one for me is transmission feel. In my mind, if you're going to put a manual gearbox in a car, it needs to feel nice. And unfortunately, in this one, it felt like you were stirring a big bucket of warm cheese. And then you add to that stuff like the clutch take-up was pretty vague, the steering didn't have a huge amount of feeling to it, and the interior, is just an absolute rattle fest filled with cheap grey plastic and so on. It's not a very nice place to sit in. And that's what you get with a 90s car, so I shouldn't really expect anything less. If it was a MX-5 money car, I'd say, yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. You know, it doesn't make a huge amount of power, but you get a cool, funky little Japanese sports car that you're going to have a lot of fun going sideways in. But the problem is, to get a nice one like what we saw in the video, you're going to be looking at over $20,000 in New Zealand, and if you want one with a turbo, you're going to be looking at over 30. And that for me is the end of it. If I had $20,000 to spend, I'd be going out and buying myself a 135i or a GT86 or an NDMX5 or even a cheap S2000 if you can find one. They are just a far superior car than what you get with an old Nissan. But if you don't care about that and you want a cool Japanese sports car that everyone goes, oh, look at that man in his Silvia, then you certainly won't be disappointed. A lot of people are going to really like it, and I think you would too. You're just going to have to cop up big money to get it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.